When it comes to PBS, we need objective and consistent measurements of escalations. However, getting a consistent and objective measurement of escalations is actually a deceptively difficult thing to do. Today, I'd like to explore why this is difficult often and how I like to go about it. Hi, my name is Eddie Drury. I've been working as a PBS practitioner for the past 13 years, and I make short educational videos about data collection. So I would like to introduce you to a man called Mo Sislak. When Mo is escalated, he starts off pacing around the place, then he moves to swearing. If things don't get better, he might escalate to pulling staff hair, and finally, when he's really well and truly had enough, he may resort to headbanging on the walls. So this is really great. We have got a very solid understanding here for what an escalation looks like. But what about the frequency? How can we find out how often these escalations are occurring? The simplest way to answer this question would just be to ask the staff, how often does Mo become escalated? Asking a question like this it's not a waste of time, certainly, but we're also likely to get an inflated estimate, and the numbers we get are likely to not be very trustworthy. This is not because staff are lying to us or trying to mislead us. It's because escalations are by their nature very highly salient. They just stand out in our memory. They're going to feel more recent and frequent and longer than they actually were. And this is not a solid foundation on which we can build our intervention. So then, if that informal data collection is not going to work, this takes us to structured data collection. We have staff complete a form each time there is an escalation. This is much better. This is a big improvement. But now we're going to run into a new problem. What exactly is an escalation? If we have 10 different staff, we're going to have 10 different definitions or lines in the sand for when, having a bad day becomes an escalation. The data we get is going to be very inconsistent. Okay, here we come. So if the problem is inconsistent definitions of escalations, then the solution surely is let's just come up with one perfect definition to rule them all. A definition that is so precise and objective that there's simply no room for ambiguity or subjectivity. So we might come up with something like this. An escalation starts when Mo paces for 5 minutes without break, if he swears 10 times in the 10-minute period, if he headbangs or pulls hair. And that escalation ends anytime there's 30 minutes with no swearing, hair pulling, or headbanging. Okie dokie. This definition is precise and it is objective. However, we've created a new problem for ourselves. This definition is also highly impractical. It's not at all reasonable or realistic to expect staff to track precisely what behaviours happened when and how many times it happened and how many minutes have passed have happened since it last happened. All we've done here is just trade precision for usability. So after exploring these dead ends, this is the solution that I finally arrived at in how to answer this question. Firstly, I have a form that simply asks, did Mo escalate during this shift? Super simple. The trick is right now, I don't particularly care how they define escalation. That's completely up to them, however they choose to define it. And then once they answer this form, they have another question in here which asks what behaviors he engaged in. So did he engage in pacing, swearing, pulling hair, any or all of these behaviors. The secret then is when it comes time to review these behaviors, I have here the time series of the frequency for how often they said he had an escalation. The trick is I don't actually particularly care about this data here. What I actually care about is the charts for the behaviors. So I'll come down here, I see the time frequency for all of these behaviors, and what I do is I exclude pacing and I exclude swearing. This then becomes my primary measure. Anytime an escalation is measured that included hair pulling or headbanging, that is my definition of an escalation now. And it meets both my needs. It's a very simple form. Any staff member can easily understand it, but I also have a clear and objective measure of escalation there. During a shift, Mo either did or did not headbang. There's no ambiguity or in between here. It's black or white. It either did or did not happen. And so effectively, as we see, my definition for escalation here becomes anytime headbanging or hair pulling occurs. And one might argue that this is an arbitrary way to define an escalation, and one would be 100% correct. For example, let's say Mo spends 3 hours pacing around the house and just swearing non-stop. That's not going to trip this. That's not going to count as an escalation, provided he doesn't pull any hair or headbang. But here's the thing. Any definition that we come up with is unavoidably going to be arbitrary. Escalations are not a binary. A person is not either escalated or calm. It is a spectrum. And we have to draw a line somewhere along this spectrum. And wherever we choose to draw that line is always going to be arbitrary. What matters is not so much that where specifically we draw the line, but the key thing is that everybody draws the line in the same place. And not only that, but in this case in particular, we're tracking the behaviors we actually care about. Headbanging and hair pulling is what's going to lead to harm. And so that's what I want to focus on. When it comes to the swearing and pacing, honestly, Mo can kind of do that all day as far as I'm concerned. Those are both like entirely acceptable ways for him to express his frustration. So I'm not seeking to address those behaviors. And that is how I go about getting objective and consistent measurements of escalations. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Comment below. If you'd like to learn more about Dibs, the PBS data collection tool I used in this video, check out dibsapp.net. Thanks.